Welcome to this deep dive. We're tearing into a source you shared excerpts from Shoe Dog by Phil Knight.
Oh,
If you've ever worn a sneaker, you definitely know the company this became. But, well, trust us, the real story of its beginnings is probably wilder and messier than you imagine.
absolutely. This isn't some dry corporate history textbook. It's really a raw personal adventure story about the absolute ground floor, the crazy idea
Of
phase.
what became this global phenomenon.
Exactly. And it's just filled with unexpected turns, internal struggles, and frankly, some pretty surprising facts.
So our mission today is basically to pull out the essential insights from this narrative. We really want you to walk away with a clear understanding of the motivations, the intense struggles, those make-or-break
And
moments.
the people involved, just utterly unique characters who took this crazy idea and somehow made it world-changing.
Yeah.
And as we go through it, you'll start to see these clear themes pop up, like the absolute non-negotiable need for perseverance,
Oh, definitely.
the power of really unlikely partnerships, navigating what seem like just endless crises,
Right.
and the often pretty brutal realities of building something totally from scratch.
Let's jump right in.
Okay, let's unpack this journey starting right at the beginning. We're talking early 1960s. Phil Knight is back home in Oregon after being away for a few years, and he's feeling, well, stuck.
Yeah, stuck is the word. He looks at his old room, his track trophies, and the source captures this feeling like, this is me still, that kind of thing.
That feeling of stagnation seems like the spark, right?
Yeah.
But the source digs deeper into his motivation. It wasn't just escaping.
No, it was more profound. It wasn't even necessarily about wanting to win exactly.
No.
It was this deep, visceral need not to lose.
Interesting.
Yeah, he craved that specific feeling, that exuberant clarity, he calls it, that you get in sports just before you know if you've won or lost.
Yeah.
He wanted his everyday life to feel like play.
And that feeling, that need, leads to this mantra, which becomes like his guiding principle.
Just keep going. Don't stop. Don't even think about stopping. Whatever comes, just don't stop. He actually calls it the best advice, maybe the only advice any of us should ever give.
Which sounds simple, right? But when you think about the sheer scale of the challenges he's about to face, it's actually pretty profound. It speaks to that fundamental grit you need.
And this idea, it first takes shape in a paper for a Stanford Business School class.
That's right. He researched importing Japanese running shoes.
So this groundbreaking idea,
Yeah.
how did his classmates react? Big enthusiasm.
Not exactly. The source uses phrases like labored sighs and vacant stares. Just total boredom, apparently.
Ouch. Okay. But his professor saw something, gave him an A.
Yep. But the really key thing the source highlights is that the idea didn't die there. It persisted. He couldn't stop thinking about actually going to Japan.
Okay, so turning this persistent thought into reality.
Right.
First step, you need buy-in. Or at least cash. He goes to his father. Buck.
Right, and his father's reaction is fascinating. He doesn't seem immediately sold on the shoe business itself, the crazy idea. No, but he's really captivated by the trip, the travel aspect. He sees it as like a finishing touch to Phil's education. He even regrets not traveling more himself when he was younger.
So he gets behind it.
Yeah, he gives his blessing.
Yeah.
And his cash, crucially.
But not everyone was thrilled. His grandmother, Mom Hatfield, she had some serious fears.
Oh, yeah. Shaped by World War II. The news she got back on her farm town, she actually cried about Japan, reminding them it was only a few years ago the Japs were out to kill us. Worried he'd be taken prisoner, they might gouge out your eyeballs.
Wow. It really paints a picture of the time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Starting a business with a former enemy nation.
Mm,
It really was a crazy idea from that angle.
definitely. Then his friend Carter hears about the travel plans, the ambition, and he's immediately like, I'm in. Gets a loan from his own dad.
Knight describes him as someone who sees an open shot, take it. Shows how important finding risk takers is early on.
Exactly. So they pack light. Bare necessities, including suntans,
Which are?
khakis. Apparently that was the term back then.
Okay, learn something new. So the journey begins, but with a detour. Hawaii.
Yep, Hawaii first. They actually get jobs selling encyclopedias door to door. Knight calls the company a boiler room. Not exactly glamorous,
Doesn't sound it.
but he learns something vital there. Selling Dreyfus funds, he learns how to speak the truth, to make a sale, earns just enough for rent and a surfboard wax.
Surfboard wax, classic. And there's this moment, right, running into the ocean.
Yeah, this feeling of just immense joy, and he thinks, why be in a hurry to leave? So they actually stay for a while, surfing, selling, figuring things out.
But eventually, duty calls. Japan.
Right. And the anxiety on the plane, the source makes it really palpable. He's sweating, looking at the Japanese flag symbol on the wing, think about his grandmother's warnings, the war history, Corregidor, Bataan Death March, rape of Nanking. He genuinely wonders if he is crazy for doing this.
That internal battle again. Push past the doubt.
And while he's there, he stumbles upon Zen Buddhism, and it really clicks for him. These ideas that, linear thinking is a delusion, that all is now, the self is a mirage.
How does that connect?
He connects it directly to running. To study the self is to forget the self, like forgetting your limits, your pain, the doubt, just performing. It resonates deeply.
Interesting. So he's exploring Japan too, right? Not just Zen temples.
Oh, yeah. Tsukiji fish market, chaotic, reminds him of the stock market. The Hakone Mountains, seeing the path to Mount Fuji. He feels this pull to climb it, but decides, no, gotta wait until I have something to celebrate.
A goal marker. And he gets some practical advice too, from ex-GIs.
Crucial advice about doing business with the Japanese. Basically, don't be pushy. Avoid being the typical asshole American.
Right.
Negotiations are soft, sinewy, full of indirection. You won't get a hard no, but you might not get a clear yes either. You kind of never know if you've sealed the deal or totally blown it.
That sounds stressful.
Extremely. But armed with that cultural insight and battling his own anxiety, he heads to Kobe for the big meeting with Onitsuka.
Okay, the moment of truth.
And the source captures this shift. He meets the Onitsuka team, the bowing, the feeling of key respect when they seat him, this young American nobody at the head of the table.
Wow.
The pressure is immense. He'd rehearsed it in his head like a race, but now it's real. Everything's riding on this. Failure means going back to that life he didn't want.
And the war hangs in the air,
But the Japanese executives, he observed, seem to have processed it. Put the war cleanly behind them through just incredible resilience and heroic reconstruction. It's a strange dynamic.
So he makes his pitch. The limber-up shoe.
Yep, he looks at the shoe, and this conviction just comes out, surprises even himself. He says, this shoe, I can sell this shoe, asks for samples, promises $50.
$50, that's the seed capital.
Pretty much. And the meeting, which he thought would be quick, lasts 2 hours, and it ends well. Bowing, shaking hands, he feels like they're partners, even brothers.
Amazing. So what's the first thing he does?
Rushes off to send an urgent letter back home to his dad. Needs that $50 wire transfer ASAP. It just underscores how incredibly shoestring this whole operation was.
Okay, so Onitsuka deal tentatively in place. But the world trip isn't over.
Not yet. He keeps going. Hong Kong's struck by the poverty, the beggars. Feels kind of sad, incomplete, that he couldn't get closer to mainland China.
Then the Philippines. MacArthur fascination.
Yeah, this idea of hating war but loving the warrior spirit. Hating the sword but loving the samurai. These kinds of contradictions.
India next.
Bombay chaos, oxen, cows in the street. Then Kenya wild, ostriches racing the bus, baboons trying to get on, needing machetes to fend them off, leaving the baboons with apparently wounded pride.
You can't make this stuff up.
Right. Florence, he's seeking Dante, struck by the anger in Michelangelo's David. Milan, he notes Da Vinci's obsession with the human foot. Seems fitting.
And then Athens. This feels like a big moment in the book.
It is. The Acropolis feels instantly familiar. He thinks, I've been here before. He sees the Parthenon and then the Temple of Athena, Nike.
Nike.
He learns the word Nike means victory. And this thought just crystallizes. This is where it all begins. It feels almost faded looking back.
Incredible connection.
Yeah.
But then reality bites. Back in Oregon, 1963, 1964, what's life like?
Back to the mundane. He's an accountant. Price Waterhouse. A card-carrying bean counter, as he puts it.
Making decent money.
$500 a month, enough to buy a Plymouth Valiant, described as vomit green.
Charming.
He feels stuck again. The source mentions him literally talking to pigeons, asking if the best parts of his life, like the trip, are already over. He feels like a deadbeat, writing to his friend Carter.
But he finds a mentor figure, Hayes.
Yeah, Hayes. A senior accountant, nicknamed Uncle Remus, talks nonstop about business, but always over drinks. Lots of late nights, lots of drinking.
Oh.
Knight even connects Hayes' drinking pace to this war mentality, fighting not to win, but to avoid losing. A surefire losing strategy, which echoes his own motivation earlier, interestingly.
He's worried about his liver making it to 1966 between the Army Reserves and Hayes.
Seriously. But then, the catalyst for the actual business arrives. A warehouse notice. Christmas 63, maybe early 64. The shoes from Japan are coming.
Okay, game on. First move.
Send 2 pairs straight to Bill Bowerman, his old track coach at Oregon.
Ooh, legendary Bowerman.
Exactly. Knight knows he's a genius coach, a master motivator, but also constantly sneaking into our lockers and stealing our footwear.
To do what?
To tear them apart, modify them, always trying to make them sleeker, softer, lighter, tinkering constantly.
And Knight really wants Bowerman's approval, right?
Desperately. Maybe even more than his father's approval. But Bowerman is famously frugal with praise. A nice race was basically the highest compliment. Knight describes his gaze as just intense, withholding.
So getting Bowerman involved is huge. He drives out to see him.
Yeah, drives out to Bowerman's place. It's remote, built by Bowerman himself, down this winding dirt lane. Knight thinks of that Confucius quote, "The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones." Starting small, building deliberately.
And he's meeting Bowerman's lawyer, Jaqua. Knight's a bit wary.
Very wary. Especially a best friend lawyer. He's anticipating complications. Plus, Bowerman himself is just eccentric. Always going against the grain, focused on rest. Came up with this crazy, impossible mile strategy.
Which was?
Run the 3rd lap as hard as possible, then somehow triple your speed on the 4th lap. Insane.
Okay, so Jaqua the lawyer, is he what Knight expected?
Not at all. He's described as sturdy, well-made, a former athlete himself. Greets Knight with a firm handshake and this disarming line about getting cow shit all over his dress shoes visiting Bowerman's place.
Ha. Breaks the ice.
Totally. Jaqqua's vibe is just, I'm trying to help here. Find a solution that works. It leads to this incredibly quick handshake deal. Deal, bam.
Just like that.
Just like that. Knight realizes, okay, I'm now in a legal and binding partnership with almighty Bowerman. A massive step.
So now they go back to Onitsuka with more clout.
Right. They asked to be the exclusive distributor for the whole Western U.S., and they asked for 300 pairs this time. About $1,000 worth.
And does Dad step up again?
Not immediately. His father balks. He's like, are you going to ask me for money year after year? Calls the whole shoe thing jackassing around. Asks Phil straight up how long he plans to keep jackassing around.
Oof. That's tough love. Captures that skepticism pioneers face, even from family.
Totally. So the business is tentatively starting. Early hires become absolutely crucial. First up, Jeff Johnson.
Right. Hired part-time initially.
Yeah.
For a store in Santa Monica.
Yep. Knight describes him as kind of misanthropic, socially awkward. He was actually a social worker, but Knight says he didn't really seem like a people person, which bizarrely was one of the things I'd liked about him. But Johnson becomes incredibly dedicated. Despite later struggles, feeling like a talentless fuck sometimes, writing these increasingly frantic, rambling letters with pagodas of PSs.
Pagodas of PSs.
Yeah. But he's all in, financially, emotionally, spiritually invested. Shows the kind of deep commitment they needed from that early crew.
Then comes Bill Waddell, another key early figure.
Huge figure. A former top athlete like Knight, but now in a wheelchair after an accident following a track meet.
Knight's first impression.
Really powerful description in the source. Shockingly thinner than he remembered, sharp features, but also this sense of steeliness, shrewdness, and underlying sadness.
He offers him a job.
Offers him the 2nd retail store up in Eugene, $400 a month. Woodall just takes it, no negotiation.
Wow.
Which highlights Woodall's commitment, yeah, but also another sign of the constant cash crunch. Knight admits he actually had to borrow money from Woodall on payday, calls him Blue Ribbon's full-time employee number 4.
Incredible. And Woodall becomes vital later.
Indispensable. Bringing order to chaos, solving problems, handling communication issues. Just solid.
So Knight's got this side hustle going, but he's still at Price Waterhouse.
For a while. But eventually he quits. Feels a bit sad leaving Hayes, the drinking buddy mentor. His boss, Leclerc Knight, notes the fittingly Dickensian name, asks, what's next?
And he says
he'll focus on his shoe thing and teach accounting on the side.
Teach accounting while running a company bleeding cash.
Exactly. He's teaching at Portland State, lecturing on the fundamental accounting equation. Assets, liabilities, plus equity. It's supposed to balance perfectly.
A Blue Ribbon.
Was nowhere near balanced. He says he felt deeply hypocritical because their ratio was like 90% liabilities to 10% equity. Just massively leveraged, constantly on the edge. That detail really underscores the risk.
And it's this accounting class. He meets Penny Parks.
His student. His first thought, which she admits is terrible, is that she seems not very bright. She asks him to be her academic advisor, and then he just blurts out this awkward job offer, need help with bookkeeping for this little shoe company on the side.
Smooth.
Totally. She's shy initially. Then he awkwardly asks her out after class. Her reaction is just a stunned, me.
And he learns more about her.
Yeah, her background. Grew up with insecurity, some poverty, the source mentions, toilet paper, always in low supply, so she craved security, which drew her to accounting, something solid. Tried Oregon State, had it.
So things get serious.
Yeah.
He needs her mom's permission for a trip.
Needs Dot's consent. Visits the house, pets the goose on the porch, sits down. First attempt to ask permission to take Penny to a track meet in Sacramento. Gets a firm, no.
Try again.
Tries again the next day. This time he emphasizes love, building a life together. It works, but Penny's father overhears and later yells about it, summing up the skepticism perfectly. You can't meet a guy on Mount Fuji who's going to amount to anything.
Wow. Talk about pressure.
Right. And the marriage proposal itself? It's peak night pragmatism, almost absurdly timed. It's literally the night before he leaves for a super critical trip to Japan to try and salvage the Onitsuka relationship.
No pressure then.
None. He basically says, look, we can't just date anymore. There's this teacher-student issue. It's awkward. So, will you marry me? And by the way, can you handle arranging the entire wedding by yourself while I'm gone?
And she says,
Just Todd.
yes. Maybe tells you something about her character too. Or maybe she was just stunned.
So while he's building this personal life, the business side, the Onitsuka conflict, is really heating up.
Yeah, it's escalating fast. He gets this dreaded letter from some high school wrestling coach back east claiming he has the exclusive U.S. distribution rights for Onitsuka. Knight just feels this profound sense of injustice.
So he preps for that second trip to Japan, the one right before the wedding.
Trying to shore things up. He's memorizing tips from how to do business with the Japanese, actively trying to push down the hurt feelings, the doubts. He repeats this idea that the art of competing was the art of forgetting, silencing the negative voice.
Exactly. That internal negotiation. Yes, you raised some excellent points, but let's keep going anyway. You have to deliberately manage that inner critic when things get tough.
He arrives in Japan, 1967. Things go smoothly.
No. Bad signs immediately. His main contact, Mr. Miyazaki, gone. The replacement, Mr. Morimoto, will only meet him at the hotel's weird revolving restaurant, not HQ.
A red flag.
Big time. Knight barely sleeps, has those anxious pre-race dreams, car chases, prison, duels. He even cuts himself shaving while trying to recite Japanese business phrases. The pressure is physically manifesting.
It's eating itself.
Short. Tense, Morimoto drops the bomb. Onitsuka plans to take over most of Blue Ribbon's territories, leaving them just the West Coast, and install their own guy.
Devastating.
Knight feels numb, like he's losing, it's slipping away.
But he fights back.
He makes a countermove, a huge bluff. He claims Blue Ribbon has other suppliers lined up, ready to go.
Does Morimoto buy it?
Morimoto goes silent, then asks about Knight's shoe factory.
Which doesn't exist.
Right. So Knight lies again, says he's got one in the works. It's another lie born of desperation, but it buys him crucial time. Time to actually find those suppliers and a factory.
And out of this confrontation comes a key philosophy.
Yeah, this fail fast idea really crystallizes here. The thinking is, okay, even if Blue Ribbon crashes and burns now, I'll gain valuable wisdom that I can use for the next business. It becomes his internal chant.
Reframing failure, not the end, just a very expensive lesson.
Exactly. So fast forward a bit, third trip to Japan. This is after he's proposed to Penny. His contact Katami is still there at Onitsuka, seems more secure, welcomes Knight warmly, like one of the family, seems happy with Blue Ribbon's growth, even Johnson's East Coast office. Things feel okay for a moment.
Okay, bit of calm. Then Katami visits Portland, 1971.
Yeah, Knight wants to make it a great visit, feels real affection, love in his heart for Katami, plans a big dinner at Bowerman's house.
But then, a meeting with the bankers, Wallace and White.
Goes badly wrong. Katami is there, and he just directly lays into Wallace, the banker. Blue Ribbon would be better off without you. White, the other banker, turns pale. White, as the source says. Meeting ends terribly.
And Katami's reaction?
He seems pleased, like, job well done, really strange behavior.
Weirder still back at the office.
Katami starts criticizing Blue Ribbon sales, calls them disappointing, says they should be triple. Knight defends doubling sales every year, which is incredible growth. Katami flashes some folder but won't say what's in it.
And Knight.
Later, Knight steals the folder. He admits later, reading his own account, cringing. How could a judge see that as anything but theft? But it shows the kind of desperate, maybe unethical moves made in the heat of battle. He invokes MacArthur again. You are remembered for the rules you break.
Risky justification. Okay, so the big dinner at Bowerman's house. This feels like the climax of the Onitsuka relationship.
It really is. Bowerman's house is unique, self-built. The key players are there: Bowerman, Johnson, Waddell, White the banker. And Bowerman, who never drinks, gets hammered on Mai Tais, becomes a different person.
It says why.
Drunk Bowerman flat out tells Kitami to his face, "We can make a better shoe than Onitsuka."
Oh boy.
And Kitami, maybe prompted by this, maybe it was the plan all along, reveals the bombshell. Onitsuka is planning to replace Blue Ribbon entirely. They've lined up a new distributor, the Marlboro Man, some big slick operator.
Wow. Just lays it out there. How does the team react?
Devastated, hits everyone like a ton of bricks. The partnership is officially over, and it's hostile.
The fallout is immediate, right? Financially.
Absolutely. Wallace, the banker, Kitami, insulted. He calls Knight, cuts them off, find another bank. Wallace apparently casts the deciding vote. White, the other banker, feels terrible, says he's sick about this, but the decision is made.
So Knight is left scrambling. No manufacturer, no bank.
Totally scrambling. He has to go plead his case at U.S. Bank, just desperate for a lifeline.
And this forces the issue of finding their own factories.
Exactly. It becomes existential. This is when he meets Sol, the factory expert, who confidently says, "I can solve all your problems. I know factories." Sol suggests looking in Japan.
So a plan forms. Go to Japan with Seoul and also bring Sumeragi from Nisho Shoji.
Right. Nisho is a Japanese trading company recommended by the Bank of Tokyo, a potential financing route maybe.
Yeah.
This trip is about finding factories and maybe securing backing. It's the critical pivot towards creating their own brand.
Towards Nike. So September 1971, they're in Japan visiting factories with Seoul.
Ordering samples. Knight ends up inspecting the first batch alone, late at night, in Nisho's closed office. He notes they're not perfect, but overall, very good. Good enough. The product side is viable.
Now they need a name. He ditched Dimension 6, thankfully.
Yeah, terrible name. Time is running out. He decides to trust Jeff Johnson's intuition, his savant-like nature. Johnson had a dream.
And the name was?
Nike. After the Greek goddess of victory, Knight goes with it.
So the break with Onitsuka is formalized, he tells them.
Tells Kitami they're starting their own line because Onitsuka was planning to drop them anyway. Kitami acts surprised. Knight fully expects war.
And then he takes Penny to Kobe right after this.
Yeah, ostensibly for a vacation, a cover story. They actually meet Mr. Onitsuka himself and Kitami again. Tea ceremony. Mr. Onitsuka makes a big fuss over Penny. Kitami invites them to dinner.
That sounds awkward.
Incredibly awkward. And Fujimoto is there, the Onitsuka employee who'd been secretly helping Knight. Knight thinks, my bride, my enemy, my spy. Just layers of subtext.
Does Kitami confront him?
Strangely, no. He avoids the topic of the breakup or buying Blue Ribbon. But after Kitami leaves, Fujimoto stays behind, spills all the details of Onitsuka's plan to cut them off completely. Fujimoto is so scared of being seen leaving with them, he actually sleeps the night on the tatami mat in their hotel room.
Unbelievable. Espionage and everything.
It's wild, and Kitami's suspicions are soon confirmed anyway. He apparently shows up unannounced at Johnson's store in Santa Monica, snooping, and sees the evidence. Nike, Nike everywhere. Game over.
Meanwhile, the new Nike shoes, they're having problems.
Big problems. The factory, Nippon Rubber, quality is not what we hoped. Shipments are messed up. Wrong quantities, wrong sizes, wrong models. Johnson is sending these hysterical letters back to Oregon.
Describing what?
Things like steel wool uppers and tongues made out of old razor blades. Clearly hyperbole, but things were bad.
Why? What was the issue?
They figure out the factory is prioritizing its orders for Onitsuka, who still use them for local production, over the exports for Nike. They have zero leverage. Onitsuka is actively screwing them even after the split.
And the bank pressure? Wallace at First National, even before the final cutoff in 71, was making life hard.
Yeah, around 1970, Wallace just refused to accept that bigger orders required bigger loans, treated Knight like a deadbeat even though sales were doubling year after year. Knight describes wanting to just scream at the unfairness of it.
This constant cash crisis, it forces desperate measures, like borrowing from the Woodalls.
Twice. First, their life savings, $5,000. Then later, their last $3,000, completely draining their savings. Knight feels awful later when he realizes they weren't actually well off. He'd just assumed. It shows the deep personal sacrifices people made.
But there's a breakthrough on the financing front. After Wallace rejects him.
Yes. Kind of serendipitous. He's walking down the street, totally dejected, sees a Bank of Tokyo sign, walks in on impulse, asks to talk to someone about doing business, gets led to this back room, feels like he's in a madam of a brothel.
And learned what?
Learns about Japanese trading companies like Nisho. They can act like banks, financing the flow of goods, guaranteeing payments is a whole different system. He manages to secure Nisho not just as a supplier contact, but as a partner and a vital source of financing. It literally saves the company.
Wow. Surviving that gauntlet. It must have forged the team, the culture.
Absolutely. This is when the legendary butt faces meetings really take shape. They're finally stable enough to focus on building.
Finding bigger warehouses, setting up distribution, hiring an ad agency, fixing the factory mess, refining the futures program.
Right. That futures program was key, getting retailers to commit to orders months in advance. Logistically a nightmare, but essential for managing cash flow and production when you have no money. They're hiring directors, forming endorsement groups like the Pro Club, approving new shoe models like the Arsenal and Striker.
And the logo gets finalized.
Yeah, the lowercase script Nike was causing issues. People misread it. Denny Strickland at their ad agency comes up with the block letter Nike inside the swoosh. Iconic.
So the Buckfaces meetings, what were they like?
Intense, held off-site at Oregon resorts, off in Sun River. The source describes them as these marathon sessions, hardcore problem-solving, shouting matches, but also tons of laughter, deep camaraderie, loyalty, gratitude, even love, Knight says.
And the team itself was unconventional.
Totally. Knight reflects on who these core people were. Woodell, the paralyzed guy. Hayes, and later Rob Strasser, two morbidly obese guys. Strasser, a chain-smoking guy, he jokes Johnson was the only sane one.
It's an amazing insight, isn't it? Success wasn't built by some polished, homogenous team.
Not at all. It was built by fiercely loyal, maybe slightly broken, definitely unconventional individuals, people with grit, specific skills, and this shared belief in the crazy idea.
They even had nicknames.
Oh, yeah. Strasser was Rolling Thunder, Hayes was Doomsday, Woodell was Weight. Johnson was 4-factor.
Why 4-factor?
Because Knight felt you had to divide everything Johnson said by 4 due to his tendency to exaggerate. Thick skin was mandatory. And apparently, after 6 p.m., sobriety was not tolerated at the Owl's Nest bar.
Except for Johnson.
Johnson was different, didn't join the drinking. He'd go for a run or read in his room. They'd have to catch him up on the decisions the next morning. Loyalty came in different styles.
Okay, so team culture is forming. But the mid-'70s bring new massive challenges. Legal battles, more cash crises.
Yep, the ghost of Onitsuka returns. They sue Blue Ribbon. Breach of contract, stealing designs, probably everything they could think of. Knight hires a relative, Cousin Hauser, who luckily takes the case on contingency they had no money for lawyers.
Reading his own files must have been nerve-wracking.
He says he cringed reading his old memos. The one about hiring a spy, stealing Kitami's folder. He's thinking, how does this look to a judge? But he decides, again invoking MacArthur, you are remembered for the rules you break. Still, his strategy becomes, play it straight in court.
The deposition sounds rough.
An ordeal, especially for a shy person like Knight. Badgered, baited, harassed, mocked. He felt he did badly. Cousin Hauser apparently agreed.
How did he cope with the stress?
Routine. That nightly 6-mile run became crucial, and spending time with Penny and his young son Matthew, reading bedtime stories, making up histories, Little Matt history, helping Thomas Jefferson, grounding himself.
But he's noticing struggles with Matthew.
Yeah, sees him as moody, sullen, a late talker with a rebellious streak. Knight blames himself, feels the guilt of not being home more, calls it a harder problem to solve than any business issue. It's a very human moment in the book.
Strasser joins the legal team.
Yes, Rob Strasser. Fresh out of law school. Hired by Cousin Hauser. Knight has this instinct about him. Strasser sees the case as a holy crusade. Knight meets him in his perpetually dark office, describes him like a mountain rising from a dark sea. Intense guy.
The trial itself. The judge.
Judge James M. Burns, nicknamed James the Just. More of a performer than ogre, Knight says.
Key testimony.
Johnson's testimony is critical.
Yeah.
He recalls that conversation with Kitami where Knight had mentioned plans to make his own shoes before Kitami officially told them Onitsuka was dropping Blue Ribbon. Undercuts Onitsuka's claim of being blindsided.
Courtroom drama ensues.
Oh, yeah. The judge issues a gag order, don't talk to the press. Someone on Team Blue Ribbon immediately talks. The judge goes ballistic. Tirade from the bench.
How does Onitsuka's case look?
Weak. Mr. Onitsuka himself testifies, claims he knew nothing about Kitami's actions. Kotomi testifies, needs a translator even though Knight knows he speaks perfect English and lies about knowing Knight's plans.
And the verdict.
Blue Ribbon wins. Huge victory. Knight yells the news down the phone to Penny and his father. They don't know the damages yet. Could be $1 million, but they won. Major celebration.
They get a settlement offer later.
$400,000. Knight thinks it's low, tries to haggle, but Onitsuka's lawyer won't budge. The source doesn't actually state the final amount they got, but the legal victory was the main thing. Vindication.
But winning the lawsuit doesn't solve the money problems.
Yeah.
Right? This is around 1974.
Not at all. They're on track for $8 million in sales, doubling again, but still perpetually cash poor. This is a critical insight. Hypergrowth eats cash like crazy. The financial pressure is relentless, maybe even more challenging than the competition or lawsuits.
They're living on the float.
Constantly, hand to mouth. Money comes in, immediately goes out to pay bills. It's incredibly risky. But Knight refuses to slow down, refuses to order less inventory. His philosophy is clear: grow or die.
Forcing the bankers into a game of chicken.
Pretty much. Pay Nisho first, then juggle everything else. One banker, Holland at U.S. Bank, kind of gets it as long as they're transparent about the mess.
Which leads to the ultimate cash crisis.
Yeah.
Spring 1975.
The big one. They owe their lifeline, Nisho, $1 million, and they are exactly $75,000 short. Hayes and Knight are just staring into the abyss. This feels like the end.
They have a crisis meeting. A summit.
Yeah, the whole core team. Tension, heavy air, the consensus is grim, resolution is in the hands of others. Their only hope is Nisho forgiving the shortfall, basically. Especially since the bank has now called the FBI.
The FBI. Why?
We'll get to that. Monday morning, the Nisho guys, Sumeragi and Ito, show up. No small talk, they just start inspecting the books, slowly peeled back the layer.
And then the bank auditor arrives.
Right on cue. He's there to collect cash receipts for the bank. The whole crisis was triggered because a $50,000 check from a customer, United Sporting Goods, bounced. Insufficient funds. That missing piece dominoed.
And then the FBI shows up.
Yeah.
With the auditor.
Yes. Claiming the bank notified them because the missing $75K stemming from that bounced check and their empty accounts constitutes bank fraud, it's escalated to a criminal level.
This is incredibly serious.
Potentially company ending, jail time serious. And then Sumeragi from Nisho does something extraordinary.
What?
He quietly reveals tonight that he hid invoices. Took about $500,000 worth of payables out of the ledger they showed the auditor to make Blue Ribbon look slightly less broke than they actually were.
Wow. He risked himself. Why?
His reason, as Knight quotes it, is incredibly moving. Nike is my business child. Always it is nice to see one's business child grow. He was deeply ashamed of having to do it, bowing, as he explained, but he did it to save them. It's an astonishing act of loyalty, blurring ethical lines in a crisis.
While this is happening, other creditors are showing up.
Yeah, angry creditors like Shesky and Manovitz. Knight says it was like a Marx Brothers movie, trying to keep them separated, running around apologizing. Somehow it works. They pacify them for the moment.
The climax is the meeting with the FBI and the bank. Holland is there.
Yep. Knight stands up, addresses them all as gentlemen, which he notes is businessese for. Take your FBI and shove it. Holland, the banker, formally ends their relationship. They're cut off again.
But Nisho saved them.
Essentially. Outside the bank, Knight bows deeply to Ito from Nisho, full of gratitude. Ito just dismisses the bank's actions. Such stupidity. Recognizing the potential the bank was throwing away by focusing only on the short-term risk.
Surviving that.
Yeah.
It must have changed things. Allowed Nike's identity to really form in the late 70s.
Definitely. A key part was finding reliable factories now that Onitsuka was out and Nippon Rubber was problematic. Knight visits Taiwan, meets a factory owner named Shea.
She sounds like a character.
Oh yeah. Eccentric. Performs these rituals, talks about shoe superstitions, throwing red shoes on the roof for luck, throwing shoes at someone starting a journey.
Okay, but he had a core message.
A crucial one. He tells Knight the difference in a shoe isn't just design or brand, it's the factory. The manufacturing partner is absolutely critical. Knight realizes instantly, I need this guy more than he needs me. A fundamental insight.
Then the 1976 Olympic trials back in Eugene. A big test for the new Nike shoes.
Huge. First real chance for Nike shod runners to compete at the highest level thanks to better spikes and marathon shoes they'd developed. The goal was simple. Just get one Nike runner onto the Olympic team.
And the 5,000-meter race.
A legendary moment. Frank Shorter, Bill Rogers surrogate Marty Lickery wasn't there, but Dick Burkle was. No, wait, it was Shorter. Virgin and Bjorklund finished first, second, and third. All three wearing Nikes.
Incredible. Total sweep.
A massive triumph. 3 Olympians, in Nikes. Huge validation.
After the race, they're celebrating at the Nike store.
Yeah, Johnson and Knight are mingling, soaking it in, and Penny is there meticulously silk screening Nike t-shirts by hand. Knight notes the exquisite craftsmanship. It's this quiet testament to their dedication amidst the big victory. It hits them. Nike is actually dominating this key event.
But the source mentions Bowerman wasn't entirely happy later.
Yeah, a later reflection. Bowerman started feeling sidelined, like he wasn't getting respect anymore, couldn't get raw materials from the Exeter R&D lab for his own tinkering, felt a bit lost as the company he helped found grew huge. Shows the complexities of partnerships over time.
Knight also reflects on handling bad news. He wanted employees to feel the same burn.
Right. He calls an employee Hollister after a rejection and is actually glad to hear raw anger in his voice. He didn't want passive acceptance. He wanted people emotionally invested who felt setbacks personally.
Growth continues, but the cash problems persist. Fiscal 76, $14 million in sales.
Still doubling, but still cash poor, borrowing every cent they can find, plowing it all back into growth. Supported by the core team, Waddell, Strasser, Hayes, it just reinforces that earlier point. Hypergrowth is a constant financial tightrope walk.
And Knight's still grappling with work-life balance. Parenting.
Yeah, questioning if his management style, his parenting style, is good or merely good enough. Vows to spend more time with his sons, but admits he keeps falling back into the old routine. Not hands-off, but not hands-on. Considers it a harder problem than any business crisis. Very relatable.
Innovation becomes key again. The air shoe idea emerges in the late 70s.
Right. He meets this inventor, M. Frank Rudy, has an idea for putting air cushioning in shoes. Rudy tries to explain the science with blackboard scribbles.
Which Knight, the accountant,
Doesn't get it all. He's incredibly skeptical, thinking 40,000 years of shoe design, and this guy thinks he can revolutionize it with air. Since rubber soles, nothing major had changed. It sounds like jetpacks and moving sidewalks, comic book stuff.
shows how even innovative companies can resist truly disruptive ideas initially.
Absolutely. But Rudy sends samples. Knight, still skeptical, puts the air soles in his own running shoes, goes for his usual 6-mile run.
And the feeling.
Transformative. He describes feeling like he could float, having this lift. He runs straight back to the office thinking, I think we might have something here. The physical experience overrides the skepticism.
He gets Rudy to explain it better.
Over dinner, yes.
Yeah.
Rudy makes the science clearer. Knight immediately sees the potential and turns the negotiation over to Strasser.
Strasser, the closer.
Exactly. Knight had seen his talent negotiating with sports agents. Says he sent Strasser into the Rudy negotiation with total confidence, like sending in the 82nd Airborne.
How does Strasser do?
Gets a deal. Settles on a royalty percentage halfway between Rudy's initial ask and Knight's lowball offer. Rudy and his partner get sent to the Exeter R&D facility to develop the tech.
Johnson tests the air soles too.
Yep. Runs 6 miles, calls Knight immediately. This could be huge. But he also raises concerns: friction, heat, buildup. Suggests putting the air in the midsole, not just the sole, to level out the ride. Smart feedback.
Strasser gets another big assignment after this, signing college basketball coaches.
Crucial market. They desperately need the University of Oregon, their home turf. But the coach back in 1975, Dick Harder, left the shoe decision to the players. It was a 6-6 tie vote. They stuck with Converse. A setback.
Speaking of setbacks,
Yeah.
the first air shoe, the Tailwind,
Yeah.
launched late 78.
Yes.
Yeah.
Big launch, tied to the Honolulu Marathon. The shoe looked amazing. Work of postmodern art, silver packed with 12 different innovations.
12 innovations. Uh-oh.
Yeah, you see where this is going. The Tailwind had a major flaw. The flared heel design caused pronation issues, leading to knee problems for runners. They had to issue a recall.
Disaster.
You'd think so. But amazingly, no real backlash from customers. Instead, Knight says they got mostly gratitude for trying something new, for pushing the envelope. The failure didn't hurt their brand loyalty.
That's a fascinating insight. Failure can actually build connection if you handle it right.
It seems so. The big lesson learned internally, though: don't cram 12 new things into one shoe. Keep it simpler. Back to the drawing board. Knight remembers Bowerman ruining countless waffle irons just trying to get one innovation right.
Strasser took this failure hard.
Yeah, Strasser, usually the rock, hit a wall. Burnout.
Yeah.
Drinking, showing up late. It was his first real failure managing a project, and it shook him.
Knight also makes a quick hiring mistake around this time. For apparel.
Hires a young accountant named Nelson, kind of impulsively, quickly realizes it was a mistake, confides in Hayes.
And this leads to a dress code.
Hilariously, yes.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving 1978. Knight is just appalled by the team's attire. Strasser's Hawaiian shirts, Hayes looking like he drives bulldozers for a living. He realizes it's embarrassing, especially when meeting bankers or investors from Nisho.
He quotes someone from Foot Locker.
Yeah, saying Foot Locker execs saw the Nike guys as gods until we see your cars. Presentation, even the superficial stuff, started to matter as they got bigger. Even rebels need suits sometimes.
Woodell eventually takes over apparel.
And does a typically flawless job, of course. Knight asks himself, why don't I just let Woodell do everything, including getting the feds off my back?
Foreshadowing. Because the next big fight wasn't with competitors, but the government.
The biggest fight yet. Late 70s, it actually starts with discussions about going public.
Why go public?
Cash flow. Chuck Robinson, a board member and China expert, tells Knight it's mandatory. The only way to solve the chronic cash shortages and avoid eventually losing the company. Frightening, but necessary.
The decision is made at a butt-face meeting.
Yep. Not even really a debate. After hearing Chuck's assessment, they just vote. Unified decision, let's do it.
But then, spring 1977,
Yeah.
the government bombshell.
The letter arrives from U.S. Customs, demanding $25 million, owed retroactively.
$25 million. Must be a mistake.
That's what Knight thought initially. Just a typo. But Strasser looks into it and comes back grim. It might be real.
What was it based on?
An archaic law called the American Selling Price, or ASP. Basically, American competitors converse Keds, smaller factories who couldn't compete with Nike's imports, had lobbied Washington hard to resurrect this old protectionist rule.
A dirty trick?
Knight calls it exactly that, a dirty little trick designed specifically to cripple Nike. It retroactively spiked their import duties by something like 40%. Customs wasn't joking around.
Knight's reaction.
Puts his head on his desk, utter despair. He compares it to fighting Onitsuka, that was a former foe. Cultural differences, okay? But now he's fighting his own government. He says he felt like the Japanese must have felt during WWII, that sense of betrayal, injustice.
Around this same time, though, a moment of personal validation. His father calls.
Yeah, a poignant moment. His dad calls, excited, because he heard the Nike swoosh mentioned on TV during an NBA game, Rudy Tomjanovich wearing Nikes. Knight says he'd never heard such pride in his father's voice. The swoosh was finally respectable. Knight thinks, almost makes this all worthwhile. Almost. The fight is still casting a huge shadow.
But even facing a $25 million bill, Knight buys a bigger house.
Seems crazy, right? But he calls it an act of defiance, acting as if things were going to work out, fortune favors the brave, that kind of thing. Also, maybe just needed a change of scenery from the stress. Though he felt sad leaving the old house, memories of his boys growing up.
He goes to meet the customs officials, the bureau kraken.
Yeah, with his lobbyist, Verskil, who's apparently going nuts from the bureaucratic runaround. The meeting is sterile, frustrating. Verskil finally snaps at the officials. Don't you know that Hitler's father was a customs inspector?
Yikes. Probably didn't help.
Probably not. But Knight's own resolve just hardens. He refuses to accept this. Tells them he'll visit every single congressman and senator if he has to. He's sweating, soaking wet from stress and the heat, but draws strength, thinking about everyone who got him there. Bowerman, Pree, Kitami, Judge Burns, Penny, his parents, not giving up.
They try political channels. Chuck Robinson's connections.
Yeah, Chuck knows David Chang, a China hand, expert lobbyist.
Yes.
They compile this massive bound document making their case. Knight wonders if anyone will actually read it. They send it off to D.C. and also copies to contacts in Beijing, kind of without hope.
Which leads to this incredibly bold idea, announced at a butt-face meeting in 1980.
American selling price ourselves. If the issue is inflated duties based on U.S.-made competitor prices, screw it. We'll make shoes in China and dictate our own price standard. It's outrageous, audacious, a move designed to break the stalemate.
So they plan a trip to China.
Big delegation. Knight creates a whole syllabus for the traveling party learns from past mistakes, includes Penny and others this time.
The journey itself, they stop in Tokyo first.
Yeah, baby steps, Knight calls it. Acknowledging the significance of being back, he walks around Tokyo, mind flashing back to 1962, the crazy idea, thinking of Marco Polo, Confucius, but also thinking like an athlete, like a team with a big lead. You can relax, get complacent, make one wrong decision, and it's over. The stakes remain sky high.
And the China trip is successful.
Hugely successful. Just before leaving Beijing, they sign deals with 2 Chinese factories. Nike becomes the first American shoemaker in 25 years allowed to manufacture in China. It's a geopolitical coup as much as a business one, gives them immense leverage against the ASP ruling.
This whole experience,
Yeah.
It seems to trigger a deeper reflection for Knight about what business even means.
It really does. He starts feeling it's so much more than just chasing profits. Uses this analogy like the body needs blood, business needs profit, but that profit enables higher aims, striving to transcend the basic processes.
Redefining winning.
Beyond just not losing, which was his early driver, now it's about wanting to create, to contribute, to add some new thing or service to the lives of strangers, making them happier or healthier or safer or better, and doing it well, crisply and efficiently, smartly.
Seeing business as participating in the whole grand human drama.
Helping others live more fully. It's a really evolved perspective, forged in the fire of all those struggles. A powerful takeaway.
Okay, so they battled competitors, banks, the government, open China. Now it's finally time for the IPO, 1980.
The dog and pony show, as Knight calls it. Grueling road show. 12 cities, 7 days. Selling investors on Nike.
Who does the presentations?
Hayes handles the numbers succinct. Johnson talks about the shoes, the innovation with raw passion. Knight says Johnson was never better. It's that combination again. Hard numbers and pure belief.
Hayes has a memorable moment.
Yeah, after a few drinks at a formal dinner, he apparently describes the core Nike team to the investors as a bunch of chronic unemployables. Honesty, maybe?
The team reflects on how far they've come.
Johnson makes a comment like, after all that, fighting and scraping, and now we're the toasts of Wall Street. But even amidst the Wall Street whirlwind, Knight notes Johnson is still just reading a book in the car between meetings. Same old focused, slightly detached Johnson.
The roadshow ends right before Thanksgiving.
Poignant timing. The day before Thanksgiving. Knight recalls his very first trip to Japan for the crazy idea, happened over Thanksgiving back in 1962. Full circle.
IPO morning. The tension must have been insane.
Knight drives to the law firm with Hayes. They're listening to the investment bankers, Kuhn, Loeb, on speakerphone. Then the line goes dead. They hang up. I'm sorry, we'll have to call you back.
Oh, God. Panic.
Total panic. Knight describes sweat just running down Hayes' forehead. Silence. Waiting.
Then the callback.
Gentlemen, we have a deal. We'll send it out to market this Friday. Relief.
Knight goes home. Tells Penny.
She just asks simply, how was your day? He gives this incredibly understated reply. Okay. Adds, we got our price.
And Penny's reaction.
Just complete confidence. Of course you did. Says a lot about their partnership, her belief in him.
But Knight that night, he doesn't feel joy.
No, not joy, not even relief. He feels regret. A strange wish that he could do it all over again, the struggle, the beginning. Wakes up the next morning, officially worth $178 million on paper, but feels like the world is the same. Nothing changed, least of all me.
Yeah.
That disconnect between external success and internal reality.
Fascinating. In the later reflections, he mentions seeing famous people. Buffett and Gates.
Yeah, in Palm Springs. Feels shy, awkward around celebrities. Overhears someone gesturing towards him and asking, who's that other guy? Still feels like an outsider somehow.
I think it's back to his grandfather, Bump Hatfield.
Yeah, this memory of his grandfather driving the grandkids around in the back of his truck, getting donuts, feeling this bliss of safety and contentment. He wonders, could I have risked everything I risked if I didn't have that foundation of security deep down from my childhood?
And that weird Oregon cave coincidence.
Right. These 9,000-year-old sandals found in an Oregon cave back in 1938, the year Knight was born. He muses, are some coincidences more than coincidental? Was the universe fudging me towards shoes all along?
He remembers Bowerman's death.
The memory of driving the bus through fossil Oregon, where Bowerman was from. Getting the call from Jaqua. Just quiet reflection on Bowerman's immense impact.
And he acknowledges later controversies. Factory conditions.
Yes, addresses it directly. How Nike became a symbol, a scapegoat for globalization issues. Admits internally, we could do better, leading to soul-searching and changes. Shows that the journey and the challenges don't stop just because you're big.
He reflects on Hayward Field, Bowerman, and the law school named after his father nearby.
Yeah, the William Knight Law School. Makes a wry comment. No one ever jackasses around in there. A final nod to his dad's early dismissal of his shoe jackassing.
Looking back, his bucket list isn't about experiences.
No, he feels he's seen and done most things. It's more about giving back, helping universities, funding cancer research, and about things left to say, and maybe unsay, telling the Nike story properly because he feels others always get half the facts and none of the spirit.
He owns up to regrets, bad calls.
Specific business ones, famously calling Magic Johnson a player without a position before signing him, tabbing quarterback Ryan Leaf over Peyton Manning in their endorsement considerations, shows even massive success involves big mistakes.
And he offers a warning to innovators, rebels.
Says they inherently have a bullseye on their backs, and the better you get, the bigger that target grows. Calls it a law of nature. Success breeds opposition.
And his final thoughts challenge the American dream narrative.
Yeah, he pushes back against the idea of America as some easy entrepreneurial Shangri-La. Argues free enterprise actively irritates the kinds of trolls who live to block, to thwart, to say no, feels entrepreneurs are outgunned, outnumbered, constantly fighting uphill.
And that hill is getting steeper.
He believes so. Feels America is becoming less entrepreneurial, even citing a study ranking its spirit behind Peru. A pretty stark warning from someone who embodies American enterprise.
So zooming out from this incredible deep dive, we've really traced this journey from a simple, kind of mocked, crazy idea born from not wanting to lose.
Right, through forging these intense bonds with unlikely partners, surviving just unbelievable financial crises, FBI at the door kind of crises.
And during those brutal legal fights with former allies, with the actual government.
And ultimately really refining what business success even means beyond just the bottom line.
It's a story that just hammers home those core lessons, doesn't it? Perseverance is number one, that just don't stop mantra feels like the absolute bedrock.
Absolutely. And the power of that loyal, maybe eccentric, definitely gritty team who fought alongside him, you can't underestimate that.
Plus, the reality is setbacks, they weren't just bumps in the road. They were like defining features of the landscape.
Totally. And that constant need to adapt, innovate, and yeah, sometimes bluff, sometimes fight dirty, just to stay alive.
You can really see how these raw lessons about building something from zero, facing down opposition from everywhere, finding creative fixes under insane pressure, figuring out what winning really means to you, how they might resonate with your own challenges, your own aspirations, whatever field you're in.
Definitely. And maybe building on those final, quite pointed reflections from Knight himself, that sense that the fight for innovators, for rebels, might actually be getting harder, that there are forces actively trying to block progress. It leaves you with a question, right?
That is?
What does it truly take to build something groundbreaking today in a world that maybe feels increasingly resistant to disruptive ideas? And given that steepening hill he talks about, what does it mean, really, fundamentally, to just keep going?